All right, awesome. Thanks for coming to the session. As we develop Source and as we pick talks, we always try to add the career development stuff because we like to, find ways to share our experiences for things we've actually, lessons we've learned. And we noticed as we were planning this one, there's actually a lot of us that have gone through the path of starting out very technical and ending up somewhere in the management realm, and ultimately kind of ending up being non-technical to a large degree, because it's hard to do both sometimes. So we put together an excellent panel of folks that have done that, and in some case have stopped doing that, which is kind of interesting. So my name is Rob Sheen, by the way, if those who don't know me. I actually started out as a pretty hardcore programmer, and I've really held on to that for a long time and doing systems integration consulting, but eventually, after many years of doing that, I've now, I run this, and I don't get to do all that many really technical things anymore. So I'll let these guys introduce themselves, but while you're doing that, just mention what was your role when you started your career versus what it is now as you introduce yourself. So you guys can choose. You want to start?
Sure. All right, so my name is Jay Bandonis. I am a senior security architect for Rudder Networking, one of the sponsors. I started my role fixing PCs for a mom and pop computer shop a little while ago. And since then I've actually gone up the ranks, and I'm a control subject because I spent 4 or 5 years as a manager at various levels, and decided that I would prefer to stay technical, and went back to a technical role. Hence the reason that I'm a control subject. So that's the short version. Pass it over.
So I'm Mike Perez. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Black Hills Information Security. We're about 20 folks. It's in South Dakota, so we do research, we do pen testing. Because it's 20 folks, you wear a lot of hats, so definitely do some technical, but also have to lead the day-to-day operations, so that's a lot of fun. I like being bossy, so by default, I get given a lot of tasks, but it's a lot of fun.
I'm Andy Ellis. I'm currently the Chief Security Officer for Akamai. I started my role, depends on where you define start. My career meandered through costuming and being a line steward. But probably my first technical role in the computer industry was as an information warfare engineer for the Air Force, which is a really fancy way of saying I programmed border routers.
And I started as a civil engineer, so I forgot that part.
So let's start with motivation. What motivated you to want to shift from technical to non-technical in the first place?
So I don't know that I'd say the shift from technical to non-technical, but more of a shift from being an individual contributor to being a team lead.
That's a great way to look at it.
I like to convince myself I'm still technical. I have a degree in theoretical computer science, so it's not like I got any less technical than imagining computers might exist. Part of it is I actually really don't like working for other people. I really like to be able to say, hey, this is the interesting thing I want to go do today, and go do it, and then show off my work. Which always made it hard when I had a line manager who would say, no, these are the things I want you to go do today. So I found it much easier to be in a position where I could sort of drive my own work. And then, of course, if I'm driving my own work, I could drive the work of the people around me so that they could do the work I didn't want to do. It actually turns out that it's hard to motivate people when you say that. So instead, I have to give them the work that they want to do, which often means it's the executive, but I end up doing the work that I didn't want to do in the first place, which is why I became an executive.
Outstanding. Mike?
Yeah, for me, myself, did I mention that I like being bossy? But also, I really like jumping into tasks and taking as much responsibility as folks will give me. So I end up running with tasks and with details to the point where people get, let's put it this way, I test their patience, so they give everything to me and let me run with it, which is awesome because that's how I love to work. I just like to really dive into things.
So I was looking for the next challenge. The role that I was in, my last technical role, I had done everything I could. So I was saying, I thought that my only next move I could make was to go into management. And I looked at that as my next challenge. That didn't necessarily, I unfortunately, unlike you guys, I didn't find that fulfilling. The difference being is that unlike what Andy saw when my line management told me to do something and I didn't want to do it, or I had my own ideas, I would just do it myself anyway. which is one of the things I enjoy about being technical, is I tend to go a little rogue. But that's the whole reason I went into management. I was looking for that next challenge. I felt as though I had capped out where I was at, and the only path I could see was going into some level of management. So.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I actually relate to everything that you guys said, because I definitely have seen, the people that generally make that shift, it's because they're either bossy or like doing their own thing or don't like working for other people. All of those things definitely apply to me. That's why I started my own company, right? So for you guys, what challenges did you face making that transition from technical to, or from basically individual contributor to executive? That's a better way of putting it.
So I think the biggest one is actually you put it there. So something we like to go rogue as a technical contributor. And so this whole model of, well, it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask permission stops working quite so well as an executive. People sort of expect you to behave. And that's actually a good thing, right? It's a good set of skills to learn, is that you're part of a larger team. And so it's easy when you're an individual contributor to say, look, this is what my job is, and I'm going to do it the way I think is best. And it's the job of your management to make sure that that's aligned with what the business is doing. When you become the management, now it's your job to figure out how can you manage that alignment while keep exciting and engaging these people who otherwise will go rogue. And that's sometimes good, right? You want to give them that room to say, oh, I'm trying something new that isn't yet sponsored. They'll work a little harder at it because it's their idea. Always a great plan. But having to really learn that you have partners in the business who might not have known who you were before, but now they really not only know who you are, but they expect a certain standard of behavior out of you that is not the same standard they expected as a technician.
I enjoy all the technical aspects still, so it's really fun to dive into a problem, but sometimes pen testing can get somewhat theoretical in terms of what you report back to a customer. So there's always that reality check of finding and whether or not that really affects a customer or their business or what's important to them. So I really like sitting down and having discussions with folks as to what we're doing and whether or not it makes sense. And when you do that, then you tend to look at the bigger picture, which I like doing.
What challenges did you face?
I'm sorry, I was just cycling back through. I think I faced two specific challenges. One of the first things, somebody said to me once that once you become management, you're part of management, and you're no longer part of the employee base. So changing my mindset to not sit at the coffee machine and complain to my other coworkers about the way I don't like the way the company's running. I'm now part of the company. I am part of the thing, and trying to wrap my mind around the idea of, no, this is the business direction. This is the direction I need to pass along to my employees, and figure out a way to have them not just swallow it, but accept it and move forward with it. That was probably the biggest challenge that I faced personally. The other thing, which I found very odd, is the team that I had been working with for years, half of them understood that I was just as technical as I was last week. The other ones assumed as soon as I had manager in my title, I knew nothing. And it was a completely polar split. So that was kind of an odd thing where I was providing technical advice to my team, and half the people accepted it because that was what I was doing last week. And the other half just assumed that because I was the manager, they knew more than me from a technical perspective.
So sorry, I was just going to add, that definitely happens with me where I'll go on engagements and folks say, well, you're the chief operating officer, what are you doing here? It's
Yeah.
like, I'm here to pen test you.
I've gotten similar things as the CEO going to deliver work. They're like, well, you must not be technical. It's like, well, maybe.
Yeah, y'all need a separate set of business cards.
That's right, yeah, that's the answer.
It's really interesting, actually, business cards. I went through these evolution where for a while my business card didn't even have my title on it because I was so worried about that. So it just said,
Right, sure.
Andy Ellis, InfoSec. Until somebody pointed out that the team was larger than one person now. I didn't quite sound the right way anymore. But actually, to your first point, the comment about that you're part of management, the other challenge that took me a while to realize it is that when people complain and you're just part of the employee base, right, you can gripe along with them and then you can move on, right? You've all vented steam, it's great, it's actually really healthy. But when you're an executive and people complain near you, you feel a responsibility to do something. And sometimes there is nothing you can do. And probably the single biggest stressor that I get is when I see people who are in distress, and I kind of mentally know that they're venting steam. They're not really upset about this thing. They don't expect change, but I want to make it right.
That's
And
definitely
you
a
can't.
challenge.
Yeah.
It's so hard sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my last company, we built it up to about 20 people, and suddenly I found that, if they were all pissed off, they were usually pissed off at me. And that was an interesting shift, because usually you get to be part of that instead of like, pretty much the buck stops with you when you're the one running the company. So how did you guys go about making the move? Because that's actually a challenge for a lot of folks. Is how do you act like, it's one thing to have the vision of one day I'll be a manager, one day I'll be an executive, but how do you actually go about doing that? How did you guys accomplish that?
I just did it. It's the
Nike, just do it.
I saw an opportunity. I saw an opportunity in my company. There was some change. I saw an opportunity. I called the hiring manager, who was at the time my boss's boss, and said, "Hey, I want this job." I didn't wait for him to offer it. I just said, "Hey, I want this opportunity," and he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because this is what I actually said to him, because I'm bored and I need a new challenge, and I think I can do this job. Do you think I can do this job?" And he said, "I'll give it a try." But I just did it. Prior to that, I'd been kind of stepping myself up to be in that role as a team leader and doing those kind of opportunities to try to show it is through project management and general management, stuff like that. But a lot of it is I asked, I jumped at it.
I definitely go into stealth mode where I just start doing work and start taking on other responsibilities until someone's like, "You're pretty much chief operating officer, so why don't we just call you that?" And it ends up just happening by default.
I tried that, just to counter that, I tried that a couple times, and somebody else got the job because they assumed I was too busy to take it.
Oh boy.
So,
So not all models are flawed. Some of them
Right.
work better than others. Because I've done a combination of both of those. My initial was certainly with an Akamai. My first management gig was actually I was part of a team of 6 people, one of whom had been hired to then be the manager. That's what he'd been told when he was hired. He said, "Look, you'll come in as an individual contributor, you'll be the manager." And about 6 months after he'd come in, our collective boss, the security team didn't have its own manager, was like, "Oh God, no, this guy's never going to be the manager." And then he decided to leave. So he said, "Hey Andy, you want to be the manager?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds great." He walked out the door. And the next day, my new boss came in and said, "Oh, by the way, we're doing a layoff in 30 days. You lay off half your team." Yeah. Warning, one of the first things that you will ever have to do as a manager is fire somebody. Either a layoff, or there's a poor contributor that nobody else wanted to deal with, and now you're the one who's going to have to deal with it. So fair warning, it's one of the first things you generally have to do, and it's not fun.
worst part of management ever.
Yes, actually.
Yeah, that part's no fun.
Yeah.
Because either you're laying off somebody that you really like, and that's really hard to do, or you have to go through the hassle of dealing with HR to fire somebody correctly. But then to grow that job, right now I'm just a manager of security, I grew that job into a C-level position by just doing the go grab more work every time, until at one point my sales reps were introducing me as the chief security officer of the company, and I'd say, no, that's not actually my title, until finally the company sort of caught up and said, well, I guess we'll make it your title since it is your Twitter handle.
That's a good stuff.
There you go.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
So just to kind of counter and add a little bit to this, because you guys have kind of been more on the path of working at companies. So I was on that same path for a while, and then I got to a point where I was like, well, I could spend the next 10 to 15 years doing what Andy did and working my way up the food chain, or I could just exit the food chain and just start my own thing. So that is a tried and true model, and that does work, because once you've been doing it for a while, suddenly, because when I first was a CEO, it kind of scared the crap out of me. I was like, I'm a CEO, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means. But after 7 years of doing it, then suddenly everybody's like, oh yeah, they don't even think about it anymore. I remember the first year, all my friends were giving me all kinds of interesting advice about how I should be running my company, and I don't get that kind of advice anymore. So it's kind of interesting.
Free advice is worth what you paid for it.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually, to one thought I had on that. So when I changed jobs, I got promoted within the same company to a manager, and I had obviously the challenges of I was part of management. My second management job, after getting the experience, my first one, was amazingly easy. Because I no longer had the stigma of, well, these are the people that I used to work with, now I'm their boss, that's their existing company. When you come in as a manager or as a director, or you're trying to go from manager to senior manager, manager to director, director to C-level executive. It's easier when you change companies because when you start, there's an assumption that you know what you're doing, you're granted the authority that you're doing, and you have, at least from my perspective, a little bit of runway. You get a month or 2 months to kind of figure out how the company's going to work. That second job and the third job were far easier than my first, even though they were more challenging environments. Just something to, from a ground level kind of perspective.
Interesting. So one of the things that we were talking about before was a lot of technical folks kind of very much attach their personality, who they are, their identity, to being technical. So as you guys transition to more from individual contributor roles to more manager and executive roles, did you find that you lost any of that?
So yes and no.
Changed.
So in one sense, yes. Like I don't get to go spend days coding anymore, right? Which Ben has been, I'm going to call him out, so I got somebody who works for me in the room. He was probably really happy for that I'm not building our dashboards. But all I got to say is that I stopped writing code on that thing like 5 years ago, and they're still using it, so it can't be that bad. That said, there's still plenty of opportunities to be technical. When Heartbleed came out, I was in the guts of the OpenSSL code base trying to understand what the hell they had done with memory management. It's really hard to get more technical than grokking OpenSSL memory management. So I get to look at that and say, yeah, I'm still technical. And then I have the skill set to take that knowledge and translate it and share it in a way that other executives can understand. Like, how did this impact? Why? What were they thinking? What were we thinking that we had this code? Like, walk through that whole chain. And so, I still get to be technical. I don't think I've lost all of my chops, but certainly things get rusty. If you ask me to look at PHP code, I'll probably more likely run in fear than correct it now. But maybe that's a good thing.
Got it.
I guess the way it affected me was, that helps to mold me, is to remember that I have a lot of responsibility, and I need to be more empathetic to folks in general. So things aren't black and white, and sometimes there's a lot of gray, and so you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and when you deliver good or bad news, pause before you deliver that message. A little bit longer than you would if it was just a buddy.
Right.
I found from a technical perspective, it changed slightly. I wasn't necessarily fixing things. My responsibility was looking at things at a much higher level, where I did not just look at my part of the business. I had to see how my part of the business interacted with another part of the business, which interacted with another part of the business. And it gave me a better grasp of how the entire business got put together. So I'd say it's not that I wasn't technical, I was differently technical.
Got it.
In those kind of roles.
Yeah, and I'd add to that actually. So there's also a different level of technical work you do as a manager, which is all around people hacking. Right? And it's surprisingly technical what it takes to understand how humans will work and how the systems they're in. But one of the things I found to be useful to me, and it took me a while to realize I needed to do this, and I do this now with my own technical staff, is I'll say, this is my belief in how the system operates, and as a result, I'm thinking we should do this. And when they come back with a different recommendation, I say, okay, well, how was I wrong? What fact did I have? Because the challenge that I have is probably a little bit different than many other executives have, is I'm the chief security executive in a company who's running technology I built. And so the things that I remember building aren't true anymore. But I don't know in which ways they're not true, and that's the thing that worries me the most, is where I'll say, well, it's safe to do this because we built all these security subsystems 15 years ago. And then somebody says, yeah, those haven't been around for 7 years. Nobody told you we got rid of that. Oh, hey, look, maybe this isn't safe. So to basically do sort of that Bayesian analysis and say, well, I have a set of priors that suggest we can do this, and if I have evidence that says that's not the right thing, learn how my priors were wrong. And that's a way to keep technical, is at least keep your knowledge fresh by pruning out the crappy stuff.
Definitely. So you said something earlier that triggers up a thought. There's often a big communication gap between business folks and technical folks, and I find there's actually another one that we don't often talk about between technical folks and security folks. You're specifically in the epicenter of all of that. But for all of you, how have you managed that transition between being the technical person on the one side of the fence and now having to be on the business side of the fence and be able to bridge that gap specifically for your peers?
It requires you to be able to communicate in many, many languages. And they're all English in theory. But if you can take a technical concept and just go explain it to somebody. So that's the starter, is go learn something and then explain it to somebody who doesn't know anything about that field. Even if they're technical or not, you have to use different language. Right? And then practice, okay, now how can I explain why we care about ephemeral Diffie-Hellman to somebody who is my security product manager who's here today, right? Say, okay, what language do I have to use that they will understand? And after a while, you sort of get to this point that you recognize how to switch languages back and forth. And you get that by listening to their language, right? If you don't sit and listen to your product people, then you'll never learn what language moves them. Because they're not going to translate from your language. They'll just put in place the processor that says, okay, the security person is lecturing me again. Let me wait. Yep, I hear you. Okay, good. We'll work on that in the next release. Right? And that's sort of a basic model you can fall into. So you have to listen to them to be able to speak that language.
Got it. How about you, Mike?
Because I work for a penetration testing firm, we're usually giving folks bad news. So I have to read the report sometimes and kind of break out the source. And instead of saying things like you have no security around X, I say limited security around X.
Yeah, I find speaking in absolutes is usually a thing of the past.
And so it's picking up at the source, and sometimes it's a business thesaurus, and trying to figure out what's important to them,
right,
what they want to hear, and how you can help them help themselves, as opposed to just condemnation.
Well, in fact, Mike just called out one of the most important things there, which is you have to be a partner, right? If I say to you, you have no security, then I'm saying that in my world, you're a villain, you're evil, you're bad, right? That's what they're going to hear that as. And so they're going to turn around and say, well, you're the bad security person. Nobody is the villain in their own story. If you came to my talk this morning, you already got to hear that. If you walked away with one thing from source, please walk away with that. Nobody is the villain in their own story. And so if you use language that vilifies, then you have failed to connect and you're going to fail to communicate. Right? You have to use language that says, despite your great attempts at this, the evolution is such that now you have an exposure like this, here's an opportunity to improve it. Right? Let's improve together.
You want to add to it?
No, I think these guys covered it, because that's really,
right.
And I think the key thing is really, talking to the business units and things, is just listen to them first.
Got it.
And not talking absolutes is important.
Awesome. So here's a funny one that we talked about when we prepped. There is a different set of rules in many ways for technical folks versus once you're in management. There's just certain things you don't do anymore, certain things you do now that you didn't used to do. So what would be some examples of some career-limiting moves that one should avoid when making that transition?
Oh, I'm going to start with this one.
All right, go.
There's one word that you can say as an individual contributor that you can never say as a manager. No. I like saying no. My colleagues will tell you that. I like saying no. I like the strength of my position as an individual contributor. Not to say I was a bad manager, but that is absolutely something as a manager you can't say the word no. You have to find a way of working around your chance to negate an opportunity that somebody may be presenting in front of you in a political manner, so that they don't feel like you just fed them their shoe. I think that's probably if I were to give somebody any advice, learn to not say no. And that's it.
How about you?
So were you talking in terms of saying no, upwards or downwards, or both?
Actually, the word.
Okay,
Yeah, you really, as a manager, you really can't say just no. I'd like to do this. No.
Right. In fact, let's put it a different way. Let's say we're a company here. Rob's our CEO. I'm the security manager, technical representative, right? You want to do a thing that's going to take Rob's blessing, so it's going to go before Rob. You can come and he can say, no, you can't do that. And you'll go work around and manage things. I don't get to say no. I'm not the decider. I also don't get to say yes. Like, this is the key part of it. I don't say no or yes.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Because I'm not the decider. Now, if it's something that I get to decide, then I can use those two words. But if it's somebody else's decision, I am not a gatekeeper. What I am is an advisor to the business, and the most career-limiting thing you can do as an executive is be perceived as somebody who is not willing to let people have the argument, listen to them, and contribute. If I walk in and say, there is no way that I'm going to let Rob make this decision, Rob is going to read that I don't trust him, that I think he's going to make a bad decision. I think he's a moron. I just vilified him. He reads that. He'll do the same thing back to me. And, well, one of us pays the other one.
Okay.
And so at the end of the day, that's the one who is likely to survive in this relationship.
Right.
And also going back to what Andy was saying earlier about partners in business, as soon as you say no, you put up a wall. That wall, as a manager, your job is social.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to be social, none of us can order any of our employees to do anything. We're not in the military, we're not
That's
police.
right.
We have to convince people to do something. And as soon as you say no, that stops the ability for communication, conversation, and negotiation. That's key to building the partnerships and having the job.
Yep.
And if you have the authority, yes is a great thing, but you also can't say that either. But no is like the biggest word that you really can't ever use, in my opinion. I'm going to stop talking.
No. For me, the career limiting move is, and I've seen people do this, is when they're unkind to other folks. And when you're in an organization and you're moving up the ladder, that person that you were unkind with or towards might be somehow brought over you. And so, they remember, back in 2001 when you maligned them. So it's just better to be kinder, and I have to remind myself that all the time because, in any organization, especially larger organizations, things happen all the time, and all of a sudden, that person that you didn't get along with in accounting is now, VP.
Or they might have a mentor who will notice.
Yeah.
And who's already up above you.
Yeah, I find that's just a general good rule of humanity, actually.
Yeah. One of the
Being a
rubrics that folks on my staff will often talk about is that you want to be helpful, you want to be kind, and you want to be true. And that order is kind of important, right? Being brutally honest is much, much less helpful than being kind and helpful, and having to fudge a little bit in doing so.
Yeah.
And we've all seen where ruthless people have advanced themselves very quickly. I'm sure you guys have seen this, where ruthless people will get ahead, and they'll get to a ceiling they don't realize, because they may be the CEO, but absolutely everybody underneath them, that they don't like them, they don't trust them, they don't
Trust, right? That's a big thing.
And at that point, yeah, they have all the power, they think. Being kind and helpful, it builds longer term relationships.
Definitely. So just to build off a little bit of what you guys said, on the not saying no, I think vocabulary matters a lot. And specifically, somebody taught me this a few years back, and I've really embraced it. Shifting from the mindset of saying yes, but to yes, and. That one change is hugely different, because yes, but is like, I'm about to tell you why it's not going to work. Versus yes, and is, here's something I can contribute to what you already said. And that mindset shift really opens people up to having conversations that they're open to possibilities, instead of trying to fight you on trying to get their way. So
I'd go even slightly further on that. It's good tactically, and look at strategically, as an executive, every time you open your mouth, you are spending political capital. Every single time that you do anything, you have spent political capital just to get those words out there. So that's an investment. What are you trying to achieve? Right? As an individual contributor, you get to say whatever you want, whenever you want. Like, you really do have this nice little base where I can pop up and I can put out my opinion, and you all just kind of have to suck it up and listen to my opinion, but at the same time, you all then get to ignore me. As an executive, that's look, I used to do the same thing, right?
No. We've all done it.
Like, not only just what are you trying to achieve by speaking? Like, you may say something true, helpful, kind, but what was your goal? How is that going to return more political capital to you than you spent in uttering those words? And doing that calculus all the time, it's why you'll often see many executives will think for a moment before saying something, because they know that words have consequences for them. and they want to make sure they get their words right. How they say it is important, and what they're trying to say is important.
Very cool. So what advice would you give for folks that are maybe looking to make the transition, or maybe wondering if they should make the transition?
Don't do it.
So say more about that. I know you have a strong opinion on this.
So I like I said, I was looking for another challenge. It wasn't the challenge that I was looking for. I enjoy playing with toys. That's my job. I build firewalls. I do security work. I like playing with the technology. I love it. I enjoy it, and I lost some of that when I lost the joy in my job when I became a manager, because that wasn't really what I enjoyed doing. And that's one of those big things that if I could convey one message to everybody in the room that even cares to listen to me, do what you enjoy. If you want to try out being management, then do it. Jump in, get your feet wet, enjoy it. But do what you enjoy. It makes, from my perspective, it makes the 40 hours a week we're working, 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week we're working better.
I'll open up the questions in just a second. I just want to get these other guys too.
So I guess my advice would be, and I hear this a lot because I work for a pen testing company and people are always coming in and asking, how can I become a pen tester? Is don't wait for someone to assign you this title or this role. Just jump in and get involved with the conference, or contribute to an open source project, or just talk to folks and figure out what the need is, and then start filling that need. And then you become that person that they go to because you've done it, and maybe you have lessons to share. And just jump in and do the work. Don't wait for somebody to say, I anoint you X, Y, or Z title or role that you want to have.
So understand what you want, right? Different way to phrase that. There are a lot of companies where, okay, if you're a technical individual contributor, you only go this high, and then management is everything above that. If that's the case, and so you say, I guess my next thing is I have to be a manager. Optimize hiring. We have a booth right over there. We have very senior technical individual contributors. Find a place where you can do that if that's what you want to do. Don't be a manager because it's expected of you. It's a very different job. But do go learn it. This is the transition from individual contributor to manager is one that you should express interest in well in advance. Go talk to your HR department. If you have a business partner in HR, say, look, I'm interested in exploring this as a career development. You should be having a career conversation with your manager at least once a year, if not weekly or monthly, where you're saying, these are the things I might be interested in. What are the classes I could take, right? Does your company offer training for new managers? Get that before you become a manager. It will make your life a lot easier to learn how to deal with employees before you actually have them.
That's good advice.
Yeah, go figure out how to do that job. Go get practice at it in places that are less risky. Like, go run a conference or join a conference. They're always looking for people to wrangle volunteers. You want to talk about a hard management job? That's one. Right? Go learn that and decide, do I like dealing with people or not? Because if you do that and say, I don't like this, maybe you find a different job. But when you want it, and many of you will, and for the people who didn't come into this room, they'll work for you, right? Go after that with passion and recognize that the day that you start that job, you are starting at the bottom. Even though you have the benefit of having all of your technical background and all of your expertise, you are now a manager. Manager is the bottom of the management career path. Even though when you were the technical person, you thought, that's the middle of the company. New career field, this is the entry-level position. That's what you give up to go be a manager. You're an entry-level employee again. Now you have to work your way back up again, and so drive at it with the same vigor that you did when you were your entry-level technical person trying to move up the ranks of technician.
One thing I'll throw into that is by doing that, you're actually putting yourself on a new path of growth, and there's a lot of new energy that comes into your life by doing that. And I can tell you, in the last 8 years, I've grown more than I have in the previous 20, just by having to take on completely new challenges and responsibilities. Because the previous one, a bunch of the previous years were doing similar things over and over again versus taking on something completely different. So it stretches you in a way that very few other things will. And nobody will wave the magic wand and anoint you manager. As you guys said, you have to start taking on those roles before somebody anoints you and notices. So, unless you want to add something?
Yeah, one thing I can say, even if Andy's advice is awesome, the idea of taking classes, getting involved, the classes that I took as a manager have helped my career, even though I'm not a manager anymore. They've helped me be able to sit up here and have this conversation with you. So they do have practical value, even if you choose to not be a manager. A lot of it's people skills, they're good to have. So even if you say, I don't want to be a manager, you didn't waste your time taking these classes.
Right.
I can guarantee you that.
You're always growing by taking on new things. We do have time for maybe one or two quick questions in the back.
How do you learn to, so when you're being asked to take a manager director role and you're kind of evaluating the equation of requirements, constraints, resources, et cetera, how do you learn to determine how well positioned for success you will be? Are there classes and problems that are big enough that you would kind of decide to shy away from?
So that's a really hard, I've been very blessed that almost all of the jobs I have been offered, in seriousness, were good ones. That said, I can share experiences from a lot of other folks. And one question is, why do they want you? And why do they want that position? And if you don't know the answer to those two questions, be careful. Right? Sometimes there exist positions that are, oh look, we have to hire a director of information security because the audit team said we have to. That's not a position you're going to want because nobody actually cares about it. So look for the why, right? If somebody said, somebody got breached. Eric Calverthwaite was here yesterday, right? So his previous job before he worked for Core Security was as the CISO for Providence Health, who was breached. And so everybody cared. By law, they were then required to have a CSO. That was the consent decree with the FTC. But the whole company was invested in the success of that position. That's an awesome spot to be in. Now, how he lasted as long as he did, given that normally that's a transition job. First person in has 2 years and they're gone, and then we could get somebody more stable. And he was there for quite a while. But that's what you want to look for. Why that position and why me?
And I would say, if you're in the position and you're trying to deal with those challenges, there are human resources opportunities for you, but I found what helped me the most with specifically dealing with that wonderful resource triangle is basic project management books. They help deal with a lot of that resource to cost to time options, because when you're dealing as a manager, managing a team of people, it's not much different from project management, where you're saying, all right, I have these quantity of projects to do, this X quantity of resources to get them done, and here's where I need to do them. What am I going to be successful at? What am I not going to be successful at? And it's almost the same formula that you would use if you were just planning out a project for step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. What's the cost? What's the time? What do I have for resources?
No, it's just.
All right. Maybe one more question? I think you were first.
I've seen examples where low-level engineers work on a product, they go up through the ranks, they become a VP, where that product is under their purview. And their judgment becomes clouded because they have emotional attachment to the product that they contributed to and they built, and they become an obstacle to change that the company wanted to do to the product. What is your advice as you go up through the ranks to become more objective and treat the product as only like an object in your portfolio of things and not your baby that you built up?
That's a good question.
I think you're uniquely qualified for this one.
It's really, so first of all, it is really hard. And sometimes you have to understand, does the company want you to be that sort of parent to the product or not? Because there were years where literally I was, even though our services are all owned by managers of engineering, VPs of engineering, and I'm in InfoSec, I owned our most profitable thing. Like, I had no engineers work for it, but when the executive took call to say, what should we do, they'd call me. And that was so the company wanted that for a while, and then at some point said, okay, we don't want that anymore. And that was one of the hardest days of my life. Like, my baby is gone. I sort of know what my kids going off to college might feel like, I hope. Or I have to feel a little nervous. But it's really hard. It's one of the most important things I can suggest that you do is get people who work for you who are willing to challenge you. Right? If you surround yourself with people who are afraid of you and who won't come to you and say, look, you're making a bad call here and it's embarrassing me, then you're going to have a problem because you'll embarrass yourself and nobody will tell you that you have done so. And that's really hard to get to.
I was just going to say, you have to get someone higher up involved who's going to make the business decision and say, you have to change it to Y or Z product or framework or whatever, because it's not helping us further our business. And so it becomes a business decision at that point that's taken out of their hands.
All right, so just, we're almost out of time, but just really quick, I just wanted to have any closing thoughts, and specifically, would you do it again? But in general, closing thoughts for the audience in addition to that.
So absolutely, I would do this again. I love what I do. I think I'm the most blessed security executive on the planet. But maybe that should, and I hope others feel that way also, but I suspect they all don't, so it sucks to be them. Find a place where what you love to do is what they want you to do. Right? Along the way, you might have to suck it up and do a job that you're not as excited about and they're not as excited about. Those will suck. Those are years that you're going to lose, that may be time you've committed. But find the place where you are going to have a blast every single day, even when you're in the middle of some of the most horrific incidents. Like Heartbleed sucked, and I had a blast every single day of it. I would come into work, and people say, how are you? And I'm like, I'm awesome. And they're like, have you not read the news lately? I'm like, I'm reading this is awesome. Like, I enjoy doing that. A lot of other people wouldn't. So they shouldn't try to take my job. They should take something else.
I would definitely continue to try on different roles. I guess the one thing that I would say is I see folks struggling with this a lot, where they're running against obstacles, whether it be people or the framework of the business. Don't spend that much time trying to change the business. If you have to go somewhere else to do what you want to do or create your own opportunity, again, don't wait for somebody to say, all of a sudden we've changed our minds and you should be in X, Y, or Z role. Make your own role, and if you have to change business to do it.
Yep.
I'd have to say, it'd have to depend on the opportunity. For me, I enjoy the technical work, as I've probably said 45 times already. But if I saw the right opportunity and I thought it was something I was going to enjoy and I was going to love, I would jump right in. So for me, it's a sure, why not?
Awesome. Yeah, I can definitely relate to Andy's comment of do what you love. And I mean, I love what I do. It's really hard. We were on conference calls up till 6 in the morning one night, and I loved it. It was a blast the whole time. We had fun. So if you don't find that the thing you're doing is energizing, if it's draining, consider doing something else. That's the best advice I could ever give anybody. Life's short. Doing what you hate sucks, so don't do it. So with that, I think that's all the time we have, and thanks to the panel. And we're going to be doing speed networking in this room next. Thanks.